At 1:52 a.m., 6 Ukrainian FP-1 strike drones were already deep inside Moscow Oblast, running dark and low toward the town of Dubna at 150 kilometers an hour. And the first Russian radar had just painted them. Ahead of them, Dubna was the largest satellite ground station Russia owned, where a war fought from orbit came back to Earth, routing reconnaissance and military traffic between the front and the satellites overhead. The 6 kept closing on it in the dark. Before the sky went light, 2 of its sectors would be burning. Inside the control hall, the night shift watched the first drones come, with the calm of men who thought they knew the size of the problem. They did not. Out in the dark, 6 more FP-1s were already crossing behind the first 6. And this wave was aimed not at the giant dish everyone watched, but at the building that ran it. The first 6 were only the shield. The operation turned on one fact. Dubna was too spread out to kill in a single pass. Its dish, hardware halls, control building, and power plant sat scattered across the compound, and one warhead could reach only one of them. So the strike came in 2 waves, an hour apart. Break the shield, then burn the core. Each FP-1 was a Ukrainian long-range strike drone, propeller-driven, slow, a 3-meter airframe that held a stored course for 1,600 kilometers and put a 120-kilogram warhead through whatever waited at the end. 12 had crossed 1,000 kilometers of Russian airspace to reach it. 7 hours in the dark at 150 an hour. None could turn back. At 1:56 a.m., the Moscow Region Air Defense Net handed the 6 drones down to the local guns. 2 systems were awake at Dubna, and both were already turning to meet them. Nearest the antenna sat a Tor M2, a tracked, short-range vehicle with its own radar and missiles, built to knock drones out of the sky. Behind it, a Pantsir S2 swung to cover the wider compound, pairing radar-guided missiles with twin 30mm autocannon. Between them, they had stopped worse than 6 slow drones. 2 of the 6 broke off and turned straight for the Tor. The crew did what the Tor was built to do. Radar lock, launch, a short climb. The lead drone came apart over the tree line 2 kilometers out. 1 interceptor, 1 kill. Then the launcher turned to the second and ran into the problem the 2 drones had been sent to create. A Tor M2 can hold 4 targets at once, and the crew still had missiles and channels to spare. On paper, the second should have died like the first. It didn't, because it never flew where the first had. The lead had come in high enough to be seen early. The trailing one hugged the deck, using the tree line and the compound's own buildings to stay under the radar horizon, and it did not lift into a clean solution until it was almost on the vehicle. By the time the Tor pulled it out of the ground clutter and swung the launcher onto it, the drone was inside a kilometer. Under the floor, the interceptor needs to clear the rail, arm, and guide. A Tor kills nothing inside its own minimum range. From the drone breaking cover to a firing solution ran about 10 seconds. At 150 an hour, that was 400 meters of closing, enough to carry it off the edge of the envelope into the dead zone beneath. They watched it come the last stretch on a screen that saw it perfectly, and a launcher that could not touch it. At 1:58 a.m., the trailing drone flew into the side of the vehicle, and the Tor stopped being a threat. Fire climbed across its upper hull. The radar went dark. The system had done nothing wrong. It had every missile it needed and 1 target it could not shoot. With the Tor gone, 1 gun was left to cover the antenna sector, and 4 more drones were already crossing the outer fence toward it. The Pantsir crew were tracking them before the Tor had finished burning. They took the nearest first, an interceptor off the rail, a hit at just under 2 kilometers, 1 airframe gone in a flash that lit the underside of the clouds. 3 left. But a Pantsir is a single battery, and it cannot stand in 2 places at once. The antenna sector and the core building sat nearly a kilometer apart, and holding the infrastructure drones meant turning the radar away from everything else. While it killed one and re-queued for the next, the three that were left crossed the last of the open ground together. At 2:03 a.m., they arrived within 9 seconds of each other. The first went into the hardware hall at the foot of the antenna, the low building that turned the dish's signals into something the network could use. The warhead opened the roofline, lit the sector white for an instant, then dropped to the low sputter of electrical fire finding cable. The second struck the technical building beside it, while the first still burned. It caught deeper. Flame came up through the roof within a minute, and the two fires began to feed each other across the gap. The third found the electrical section that fed both, and turned two building fires into a sector on fire. Switchgear went in hard cracks, each throwing sparks and dropping another run of cable into the flames. Smoke rolled off all three buildings, thick enough to throw the dish above into black silhouette. The dish itself, 32 meters of steel, one of the largest in Europe, took the blast wave and stayed standing. Built as a reflector, not a wall, it took 120 kilograms of explosive against open steel as a scar, not a collapse. But everything that made it useful was in the halls burning beneath it. The antenna still pointed at the sky. It had nothing left to say to it. By 2:10 a.m., the first wave was spent. 4 drones had reached the compound. 2 had died to the guns. The dish stood, the Pantsir was still hunting, and on the Russian boards, it looked like a hard night survived. It looked like the attack was over. It was half finished. For the next 40 minutes, nothing new came. The fire under the dish burned into the walls of the hardware hall. The Tor sat dead and glowing at the edge of the antenna sector. The defenders used the quiet to get ready for the attack they thought had already happened. The Pantsir repositioned to cover the core. The electronic warfare crews stayed up on the drone bands. The mistake was the oldest one there is. They had counted the wave that came, not the wave that was still coming. At 2:51 a.m., the net painted 6 more drones, low and slow, on the same bearing as the first. The Pantsir swung its radar back toward the fence and started sorting them, 6 coming in and 1 gun left on the whole compound to answer them, the Tor still burning where it had died. This time the geometry was worse for Russia, not better. The first wave had met 2 guns. The second arrived against 1, in a sector already half on fire, with the crews certain the night's work was behind them. 1 drone came straight for the Pantsir, meant to do to the last gun what the trailing drone had done to the Tor, get in close and put a warhead through it. It never got the chance. The Pantsir carried both its weapons for this fight, missiles for the reach, twin 30mm cannon for anything inside the missile's minimum range. The suppression drone crossed into the cannon's envelope at under a kilometer, and the guns tore it out of the air before it reached the vehicle. The gun Ukraine had come to kill killed the drone sent to kill it. A second drone never reached anything to hit. The FP1 flew its stored course on a satellite fix, and the Dubna electronic warfare crews did not simply jam that fix, they fed it a false one. To the drone's navigation, the whole compound slid a few hundred meters east. It corrected toward a Dubna that was not there and flew into an empty field north of the fence. Its own guidance had been turned into the thing that made it miss. Then the Pantsir took a third out of the sky as it lined up on the control building. An interceptor at just over 2 kilometers, clean. That left 3. Between them, the guns and the jammers had killed or turned aside 5 of the 12 drones sent against Dubna that night. The 3 still flying were the 3 that mattered. At 3:14 a.m., they crossed the inner compound together, and the Pantsir crew ran into the same wall the Tor had hit an hour before. The radar held all 3 drones. The launcher could only answer 1 at a time. The crew had a handful of seconds to choose which to kill, knowing the choice handed the other 2 a clear run at the building behind them. They took the leader. An interceptor off the rail, a hit, 1 drone gone. and in the seconds that shot cost them, the other two closed on the main control building from two angles. Below the arc the launcher was still swinging through. The gun had made the right call, and it had not been enough, because there was only ever going to be one of it. This was the building the whole night had been built to reach. Not the dish, but the hall that ran it. Wave 1 had never touched it. Wave 2 had spent 9 drones and an hour of burning steel to put 2 of them here. The first punched through the side wall, low, where the hardware floor ran. Fire went into the racks that worked the satellite links, found the cable trays, and swept the length of the floor. The second came in over the roof a few seconds behind and drove into the upper level. Flame came up through the roofline almost at once. Windows blew out along the top of the building and pulled in fresh air, and the 2 fires climbed toward each other through the middle of the structure. The third did not go for the building at all. It went for the power annex, the block of generators, fuel, and switchgear off the flank that kept the whole compound alive. That was the largest blast of the night. The annex let go in a single, hard flash. Fuel, stored power, and switchgear all at once. There was no ammunition in it, and it needed none. Fuel and switchgear alone drove heat and pressure into the flank of the control building next door. The shared wall was already burning inside, and the blast against the outside was more than it could hold. A section came down. A run of roof folded in after it, dragging the upper floor's fire into the gap. For a moment, the core sector burned brighter than the antenna sector, still glowing a kilometer to the west. And through all of it, the Pantsir kept firing, killing nothing now because there was nothing left to kill. The last gun on the compound, still awake over 2 sectors burning at once. By 3:20 a.m., it was over. 12 drones had crossed more than 1,000 kilometers, 5 were killed or turned aside, and the guns had done everything they were built to do. It changed nothing that mattered. 2 sectors of Russia's largest teleport burned till dawn, the dish standing intact and useless above a gutted hardware hall. The control core open to the sky, the power plant a crater feeding the flames beside it. Redundant links kept Dubna from going fully dark. It was broken where it was slowest to rebuild. Dubna did not fail because its defenses were weak. The Tor killed a drone, the Pantsir killed 3 and was still firing at dawn. 28 ready interceptors and 2 of the best point defense guns Russia fields stood over that compound, and 7 cheap propeller drones reached it anyway. It failed because a compound that large can never be made small enough to cover. A Tor cannot shoot what is already inside its minimum range. A Pantsir cannot stand in 2 sectors at once, and the attack was built to arrive in more places than the guns could reach. The dish still points at the constellations overhead. Useless. Somewhere behind the front, the next 12 are already being fueled. Nothing about tonight was a fluke. It was arithmetic.